Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we will look at finding the rule. But to find the rule, we need to know what a rule is. In maths, a rule is an equation that has two or more variables, one of which is the subject. So subject of the equation means it's by itself. So for example, something like y equals 3x minus 1, that is a rule. It has two variables, and y is the subject of the equation because it's by itself. So something like x plus y is not a rule because it's not an equation. There's no equal sign. So we have two variables, but no equal sign. Similarly, an equation like x plus 1 equals 7 is not a rule. Why is that? It only has one variable. A rule needs to have two variables, one of which is the subject of the equation. It needs to be an equation. All right, how does that help us here? Well, we need to find the rule for each of these. Now we know what we're finding. We are finding an equation that has two variables, one of which is the subject of the equation. So when we're asked to find the rule, our equation is always going to look something like this. Y equals something times x plus something. That's what we're after. You see, a lot of people, when you say to them, find the rule, they write you a bunch of words like goes up by 5. But that's not what rule means in mathematics. In mathematics, a rule is an equation. It's going to have two variables. In each case here, x and y are the two variables, and y is going to be the subject. So all of our solutions will look like this. Okay, so how do I find what goes in the box? Sometimes you'll just be able to see here. You might be able to see that the y value is always double the x value in this particular table. If you multiply the x value by 2, you get the y value. So this is just going to be y equals 2x or 2x plus 0. In this case, we don't really need to write the plus 0, so we'll get rid of that. So this is a rule because it is an equation that has two variables, one of which is the subject. What we're after when we're finding a rule is basically an equation that tells us how do we get the y value if we know the x value. So the x value is our input into this function. If we know the input, how do we find what the output would be? What do we do to the input here to get this number here? What machine do we put it through? If we put each of these numbers here through a times 2 machine, I will get the y value. Okay, let's look at this one here. What do I need to do to the x value to get the y value? So sometimes you won't be able to see the rule straight up. So how would we figure it out in those cases? So notice here, x is going up by 1 and y is going down by 2. Remember, each time x goes up by 1, y needs to go up or down by the same amount, otherwise it's not linear. So each time x goes up by 1, the number by which y increases or decreases goes in this first box. So here, each time we add 1 to x, we subtract 2 from y. Y is going down by 2 each time. So actually that minus 2 goes in this box. If y was going up by 3, if we were adding 3 each time, we'd put a positive 3 here. If we were subtracting 4 each time, we'd put a negative 4 there. So the number, the amount by which y is increasing or decreasing goes in the first box. In this box always goes the y value when x is 0. So when x is 0, y is 3. So what does that mean here? It means to get the y value, you have to times this x value by negative 2, then add 3. Negative 2 times negative 1 plus 3 is 5. Negative 2 times 0 plus 3 is 3. Negative 2 times 1 plus 3 is 1. Negative 2 times 2 plus 3 is negative 1, and so on. So x is the input value. We need to put the input value through a times negative 2 machine and then an add 3 machine in order to get the output, the y value. All right, let's now look at this one here, which is a bit harder. It's harder because x isn't going up by the same amount each time. It goes up by 2, then it goes up by 3, then it goes up by 4. So what goes in each of these two boxes hasn't changed, even though this is a harder question. We're still going to put into this first box the number by which the y value increases or decreases each time the x value increases by 1. So let's figure out what that is. How much would y go up or down by if x just went up by 1? Well, when x goes up by 2, y goes up by 6. When x goes up by 3, y goes up by 9. When x goes up by 4, y goes up by 12. You can see here, whatever x goes up by, times it by 3, that's the amount by which y increases. So that number that goes in the first box is 3. It's 6 over 2, or 9 over 3, or 12 over 4. How much y goes up by? The increase in y divided by the increase in x. If x goes up by 4, y goes up by 12. That means if x were to go up by 1, y would go up by 3 each time. So that's why I put a 3 in the first box. All right, now we need to find the y value when x equals 0. Well, it's not given to us here, but we can figure it out. I can put a 0 here. If x goes up by 1, I've just figured out that y must go up by 3. So what would go in there is -2 plus 3, which is +1. So the equation or the rule is y equals 3x plus 1. To get the y value, you multiply the x value by 3 and add 1. So -3 times 3 plus 1, -8. -1 times 3 plus 1, -2. 3 times 2 plus 1 is 7. 3 times 6 plus 1 is 19. So to get this output, you would need to input these values through a times 3 machine, then a +1 machine. You need to times each of these by 3, then add 1 to get the corresponding y values. All right, thank you so much for tuning into this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.